the autumn chill descends on Boca Chica, Texas, the scene is abuzz with anticipation. SpaceX is now poised for a second air test of its giant rocket, the Starship. After months of preparation and several modifications following the rocket's first unsuccessful attempt, the team is ready for another launch. A wet dress rehearsal has been completed, loading the rocket with a volatile cocktail of liquid oxygen and methane. The U.S. Coast Guard's recent advisory for sailors to avoid certain areas on November 1 suggests a potential launch window. However, a sense of suspense lingers in the air as the official green light from the Federal Aviation Administration remains pending. During this time of waiting, SpaceX de-stacked Ship 25 on October 26, followed by the removal of the hot staging ring yesterday. Stay tuned, we're going to get into that and lots more in today's.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of my channel.
Well, what a thrilling week it has been at SpaceX's Star Base launch site. That's no cause for panic, as they can reinstall that and put the ship back on top within a day of the massive mechanical arms of the Mechazilla launch tower. With this de-stacking, Ship 25 ties Ship 24 for most stacks and restacks. However, for Ship 25 this should be the final time until regulatory approval and the arming of the flight termination system. This time, it did appear that Ship 25 was loaded with at least some liquid oxygen because its engine chill venting was spotted a few times, flowing through that diverter pipe and cascading around the booster. Now, during detanking, I was surprised by this. Whoa, is it okay after that? Certainly a jaw-dropping eruption. That was a full power deluge test, which we assume included the new additional water tank and the high-pressure canisters recently installed. This one really did reach quite a height. Take a look at this comparison shot of the water deluge test back in July versus the one from this week. This one, I think you will agree, looks to have had a bunch of extra oomph attached to it. As far as we know, everything held up perfectly fine. Finishing up for the day, Booster 9's engine bay was purged a total of 4 times, and Highway 4 was opened back up. More excitement continued on Tuesday. Yes, it was go time for a full wet dress rehearsal. But to the past, the road closure moved a lot further back, eventually leading up to the build site itself, where only the essential personnel were working. Yes, this test is a lot more dangerous because they use methane, and to kick off all of this testing, another FireX test was performed, followed by the tank farm merrily churning. Away. The orbital launch mount vent fired up again, and once cryogenic liquid reached this stage of the vent, which has been nicknamed as the waterfall, we were very close to the propellant load starting. There we go, with no more venting, the propellants were being loaded into the booster. Back up that frost ran on the oxygen tank and then the methane tank, but this time around, we were certain that they were indeed loading both the oxygen as well as the methane. The good indicator of a methane load, by the way, is the energetic activity of the nitrogen boil-off from the methane subchillers on this side of the tank farm. Ship 25 also started receiving its cryogenic propellants too. The propellant load looked great, and Busanorm was soon here performing a grid fin test. With all 4 of those moving, they must all be still installed. So we were a little unsure about that since we saw SpaceX lift something out of there a few weeks back. Just after this, the engine chill on both vehicles kicked off, and everything was just running extremely smoothly. It still amazes me to this day that there are thousands of tons of propellant being shifted here with what looks like such great ease. When fully tanked, the total propellant mass for just one full stack is roughly around 4,600 metric tons, and that is just the propellant. To put that into perspective, the Saturn V fully loaded for tank-off was around 2,800 tons. Yeah, the fully stacked Starship is an absolute monster. So after what looked like a short hold during the final count after propellant loading was finished, here was the FireX test indicating when an engine start would have been for the real flight. Yes, it all looked to be a very successful test. Now, one question that did pop up once the tanking of the full stack started was what about the water deluge test in this case? Well, here it was roaring out later for some reason. Always amazing to see that. SpaceX then shared these awesome images, and this one in particular pretty much has the same angle as one posted for the first stack of Booster 7 and Ship 24. Again, it looks like the final preparations are screaming along because Ship 25 was soon on its way back to ground level once more. Normally, the return to full stack is likely a day or two before the actual launch date. If all goes as according to plan as SpaceX hopes, we'll see the return of the world's tallest rocket next week. Although this is quite ambitious, there are those that are still holding out on hope that this dream comes true. In another significant move, Ship 26 was also transported back to the rocket garden on Friday. Previously, Ship S26 ignited one of its Raptor engines. The test, called a deorbit burn, demonstrates the engine's flight-like startup. The Starship is a next-generation rocket designed for deep space travel and is the largest and most powerful rocket ever built. It comprises the first stage booster, called the Super Heavy, and the upper stage spacecraft known as the Starship. Both elements are powered by Raptor engines with 33 engines for Super Heavy and 6 engines for Starship. The goal is to make both stages fully reusable, which will be enabled by deorbit burns and other engine firings that allow the vehicles to safely return to Earth after liftoff. Ship 26, the naked-looking Starship prototype with no fins, was looking to move out after its successful static fire a little over a week ago. The full stack achieved 2 days of glorious integrated testing as well, but first let's check out Subawoodle Pad B and Ship 26. Last Friday evening, Lab Padres Rover 2 camera caught it performing igniter tests. At around midnight, 2 self-propelled modular transporters arrived, and a transport stand was lifted onto them. Once down, that same crane then turned and connected to the ship ready to lift that. There we go, lifted off the pad and straight onto its transport stand. Once it was fully hooked up to the pressurization equipment, it was moved to the build site with the fate of this vehicle now unknown. Will its return after the second orbit of flight test, or was it destined to be scrapped like its flapless companion, Ship 27? Now before we move on from Ship 26, a few of you asked why SpaceX performed this static fire with a single sea-level engine when it was confirmed to be a flight like a deorbit burn. It's weird, right? A sea-level engine for a deorbit burn, wouldn't they use the vacuum engines instead? This may not make much sense at first as vacuum engines are more efficient in space, but here is the thing. Firing just one central gimbling engine would use the least amount of thrust. What you actually want is a slow acceleration to ensure that the quite small change in velocity needed to deorbit is as accurate as it can be. A deorbit burn needs to be very precise, especially for a reusable rocket because they need to re-enter and return to an exact location. You certainly don't want to overshoot the mark, so using just one engine really does make sense. Couldn't they have just used one of the vacuum engines though? Well, if you take a look at this over-exaggerated clip made for us by the talented Chameleon Circuit, you can see that if they fire one of the vacuum engines, the thrust is going to push it very off-center. These can't gimbal to alter the direction of thrust at all either, so the only possible way to try and counter any offset thrust is by gimbling a center engine slightly to counter it. Hopefully, all that makes sense and clears up any of that confusion. Ship 26 now seems to have completed its mission. It is unknown what SpaceX's next plans are for it. Maybe it'll be on display at the Rocket Garden for quite a while. The next orbital flight remains the main focus at this time. More surprisingly, SpaceX even plans for the third Starship orbital flight attempt. This isn't a joke, as the FCC announcement here proves. The Elon Musk-led company has requested a 6-month window from December 15 to June of 2024 to launch a Starship prototype to Earth's orbit from the company's Starbase facility in Boca Chica, Texas, according to the application. The FCC regulates all spacecraft communication in Earth's orbit. Although this is probably only for the second Starship OFT, experimental recovery does imply Flight 3. They seem to do things in pairs, but at the end of the day, it will depend on the success of Flight 2. If hot staging and heat shield tiles work, it seems logical to move on to catching procedures and finally the second tower design update in the event that the OLM-1 has issues. In any case, the excitement for the Starship program is increasing by the day. A successful launch is not merely a feat of engineering. It's a dance with regulatory bodies. SpaceX has been laboring to comply with safety, environmental, and regulatory requirements to secure the FAA's coveted launch license. Among these is addressing concerns around SpaceX's deluge system, designed to mitigate the rocket engine's noise, heat, and force by spraying copious amounts of water. However, environmental advocates argue that SpaceX may not have the requisite permits and that the system could potentially threaten sensitive wetland habitats and endangered species. Despite these hurdles, SpaceX has persisted, continuing to test the Starship and its launch pad. After several tests in the past few days, SpaceX has clearly demonstrated the functionality of its pre-flight systems for the Starship rocket. It seems like the final pieces are falling in place for the highly anticipated Starship flight. The pace of activity around the Starship mission has notably accelerated, with the Coast Guard issuing a warning to mariners about a potential rocket launch in Boca Chica, Texas slated for the first week of November. While such notices are not definitive indicators of a test timeline, SpaceX's recent test aligns with a heightened anticipation. This timeframe rules out a test flight on November 1st if we're only considering NASA's placeholders. We're paying close attention to their actions because NASA's the organization that stands to benefit significantly from observing Starship. They've chosen the upper stage spacecraft as the human landing system for the Artemis program. Expanding on this, the Coast Guard's recent notice to mariners provides an updated timeframe for launch activities in Boca Chica, Texas. While not explicitly specifying a SpaceX rocket launch, the implicit understanding arises from the fact that SpaceX is the exclusive entity conducting rocket launches from this site. There's no longer any doubt about the scheduled milestones for the second Starship test flight thereafter. Like the previous notice, the latest update from the Coast Guard is clear to warn mariners about hazards from rocket launching activity, which can include free-falling debris or descending vehicles or vehicle components under various means of control. It also adds that placeholders will remain in place for every day starting from November 1st until conditions permit for a launch. These hazards should be in place starting from November 6th, according to the Coast Guard. In addition, after SpaceX concluded the operation of Starship on the launch pad October 24th, along with the anticipated water deluge system test, officials from Fish and Wildlife also visited the launch pad early the next morning. This marks their second visit to Starbase to assess the area surrounding the Starship launch site. On the evening of October 25th, the agency said in an emailed statement that it initiated the review, a consultation under the Endangered Species Act, with the Federal Aviation Administration on October 19th. Fish and Wildlife now has as long as 135 days to create an updated biological opinion about how Starship and its launches impact the local environment. However, the agency does not expect to take the full amount of time, a representative said in the statement. The focus of the review revolves around SpaceX's addition of a water deluge system to the launch pad located at the company's Starbase facility in Boca Chica, Texas. The deluge system sprays significant amounts of water during liftoff to lessen the heat, forces, and gases that the colossal rocket unleashes. The FAA oversaw a mishap investigation after it grounded the rocket in the wake of the company's first test flight April 20th. During that flight, Starship successfully took off from its Texas launch pad but suffered multiple engine failures as it ascended. The two-stage rocket then failed to separate its plan and started spinning out of control, prompting SpaceX to intentionally blow up the vehicle. The vehicle engines sent chunks of debris and pulverized concrete across 385 acres of nearby land. The takeoff also sparked a 3.5-acre fire on the state park land. We're all wishing the best for them on their way to the moon and eventually Mars. Well, if you like this video, make sure to give a thumbs up and subscribe. See you in the next video. Thanks for watching. By the way, are you familiar TalkTalk Philippines app? TalkTalk is a delivery service app designed to connect more people by delivering items door to door. For more information, download the TalkTalk app, here down below.